In today's video, we're going to talk about vocal fold nodules and why they're not the career-ending injury that everybody used to at least think they are. Hi, I'm Stacey Menton from SingingMamasHomestead.com, where we provide information for singers and professional voice users about vocal wellness on a path to whole person wellness. Today we're going to talk a little bit about vocal nodules. So first of all, a little backstory. There were several different inaccuracies that were told to me during my career. So the first inaccuracy or myth was that vocal nodules were a sign that you weren't using your voice in a healthy manner. Another myth was that you just didn't have the voice that could cut having a vocal career because you must be weak because you had a vocal injury. So as a speech pathologist, I start to get a little bit upset about this, and let's talk a little bit about why. So first, let's talk about the anatomy of vocal nodules. Vocal nodules are essentially like little calluses that occur on so if this is your whole vocal fold, they tend to happen on both sides in that V shape. They tend to happen in the anterior 2/3. And that's because that's kind of the striking zone. That's where they get the most impact stress. But essentially they're like little calluses that form on the top couple of layers of the vocal folds. Old school, they used to either remove them, so they'd go in and just cut them off, which actually also cut into some of the deeper layers of the vocal folds called the lamina propria, which is not ideal. Or they would tell you to be quiet for several months to make the swelling and everything go away. And then you still had to learn how to use your voice appropriately, or you were just considered, vocally weak, I guess. I don't know. But now what we know is that vocal therapy, voice therapy, is very effective in treating vocal nodules and getting them at least to go down in size and the vocal folds to become more pliable with work towards effective and efficient movement and vibration of the vocal folds. So that's the anatomy piece of this. What does this mean for our voices if we have nodules? So nodules are kind of hard because they're callus-like, just like you would get a hard callus on your hands if you did too much clapping or if you used a jackhammer for too long. Those calluses, though, on the vocal folds are supposed to vibrate in this nice little like gelatinous form. They kind of close at the bottom and then they open this way. So they constantly are moving like this. That's the vibratory pattern that they're supposed to be in. When you have vocal nodules, the nodules poke out a bit, so they meet first, which means that your vocal folds are no longer as efficient as they used to be because air can come up around the nodules themselves, which will make your voice sound a little more breathy. Not as breathy as I'm making mine to be, but it can make it a little bit more breathy. The other thing you'll hear is roughness because you don't have a smooth, straight vocal fold edge. They don't close as evenly, and that causes a rough sound to the voice. And then you'll also notice, especially as you get higher in pitch, because the only points that are really meeting then are the nodules, you get really breathy, and sometimes you might not be able to hit a pitch that you used to be able to hit no problem. But essentially it's because the vocal folds are stiff in that area. They don't vibrate well, and then the fact that they're meeting only there when you stretch the vocal folds means that you don't get the really good vibration of the vocal folds and the mucosal, what we call the mucosal wave, which looks like, if somebody threw a stone into water and you would see the ripple effect. That's what it should look like on the top of the vocal fold. But because you're starting it in that stiff area, it's hard to get the voice to start, and it's hard to hit those higher notes. And you're just a little bit less accurate with your ability to hit and sustain those notes the way that you used to. So that's what you would usually see. So you'd usually hear a rough, breathy, and sometimes strained vocal quality. The strain comes in because the brain perceives, oh, there's something wrong with the voice, let me fix it. And the brain starts to use all these fun little muscles in the front here that aren't meant to be used for voicing. And when it uses those, it's just not, it's not efficient anymore. And the voice starts to sound like you're pushing. And sometimes it's like, oh, if I push like that, I got the note. So the brain learns, oh, well, if I push like that, I can get that note. And then you start pushing and it still isn't working, because then you're causing even more inflammation from all the pushing. So getting back to how is this not a death sentence for my singing career? The number one treatment for vocal nodules is voice therapy. So essentially, if you can get in and see a good voice therapist, somebody who knows what they're doing, somebody who has worked with singers in the past, they can rehabilitate your speaking voice and your singing voice. It's important that they rehabilitate both, because number one, singers tend to be very gregarious, so we all talk, and using our voices for speech is just as important a lot of the times when it comes to getting jobs, calling about a job that might be offered to you, being interviewed for whatever show you're in. There's just so many reasons we use our voice outside, and then, talking to friends and family and coworkers and all of that. Not to mention the day jobs that we all tend to have at some point or another, and teaching. Teachers, K-12 teachers and professors also can end up with vocal nodules because they're not using their speaking voice in an ideal manner. Cheerleaders have a tendency to end up with vocal nodules because they use a lot of loud voicing for a long period of time, and they're never really taught how to use their voice in that loud way. So getting a good voice therapist who can work with you on reducing all the extraneous muscle tension, realigning those subsystems of voicing. If you want to learn more about the subsystems of voicing, I'll put a link in the comments below, or I'll put a link in the description below of the video I have on that piece. Essentially, just getting in to see a good voice therapist will help you improve your voice and learn to use it in the most efficient manner. And you should be able to get back to singing or performing or talking for long periods of time, with the caveat knowing that you need to take care of your voice. So sometimes the speech pathologist is going to have to give you some tough love and say, hey, I know you love talking to all of these people, but it might be important in your case to be quiet for every hour you talk, you need at least a 15-minute vocal nap. And those 15 minutes add up then. So if you're talking for an hour, if you can, every hour, then book in 15 minutes of your day where you're just quiet. But just recognize that when you're using your voice, overusing your voice, so it's usually overuse, misuse, or abuse that causes vocal nodules. So you just need to be really careful about how you're using it and why you're using it, and just be really cognizant of those situations when it's going to be imperative that your voice be really healthy. If you want to learn more about vocal health and hygiene, I do have a course that I'll also link in the description below, and that teaches you all about how to take care of your voice from a very general standpoint, talking about things like how to manage your reflux, how to manage your mucus, how much water should you really drink. All of those things are kind of addressed within that course. You also want to make sure that the voice therapist you're seeing, ideally you want to find one who's also a singing voice specialist, because singing voice specialists can work with you on your singing voice and your speaking voice all at the same time, and it's all rehabilitation. So if you're using your insurance to pay for therapy, if you can see a singing voice specialist who is also a speech pathologist, you can get it all covered all under one procedural code that will be billed to your insurance. But if you cannot find a singing voice specialist, then your next best option would be to find a speaking voice therapist, so a speech pathologist who has taken some additional continuing education in voice therapy. They can work with you on your speaking voice, and then when it comes to your singing voice, they may be able to refer you on to a singing voice specialist who would be like a voice teacher who has also done some additional continuing education in vocal health and hygiene, and is a little more familiar with working with voices that are not completely intact at that point. So a little bit more on the rehabilitative side instead of your typical studio voice teacher who has some knowledge and knows when to refer. And you would work with them, so the speech pathologist, the singing voice specialist, who could be the same person, or two separate people, and then also your voice teacher and you, as well as your laryngologist, which is the doctor that's going to be your best bet to getting diagnosed appropriately. You want your whole team working together with you. You don't want to feel like they're all disjointed. So if you can find a speech pathologist who's also a singing voice specialist, then that's one less person that has to keep going in with the loop. I have a video all about the voice care team, and I'll link that below as well. So essentially the bottom line is that if you fear that you have vocal nodules, getting to see a laryngologist, a fellowship-trained laryngologist who can diagnose appropriately. Sometimes your general ENTs, while they are very well-meaning, will diagnose a vocal nodule, but it's on one side. And a laryngologist will almost always tell you that if it's unilateral, if it's only on one side, it's not a nodule, it's something else. And sometimes that something else isn't amenable to voice therapy. So you could be wasting a whole bunch of time when it turns out that you still, you needed some kind of procedure to fix the bump, rather than just voice therapy, which is the treatment for vocal nodules, and in some cases for some unilateral lesions. But you always want to start with seeing a laryngologist who's going to refer you on to a specialist, a voice specialist, like a speech pathologist, singing voice specialist, because they'll know who's good and who to send you to. So that's the first piece, is to get to a proper diagnosis. The second piece would be to do the therapy. If you have vocal nodules, voice therapy is going to make you better. You just need to do the things that the speech pathologist tells you to, and make sure that you're incorporating all of those techniques both into your speaking voice and your singing voice. And, just keep working at it. But recognize that your voice has a finite amount of time it can talk without getting damaged. So you have to make sure that you're meeting all of the needs and caring for your voice as best as you can. And any good singing voice specialist or voice pathologist, speech pathology voice specialist, should be able to give you all of the education piece of how to make sure you're really taking care of your voice well, and how to make your voice better, and give you exercises to do. It's like physical therapy for your voice, and it works, and it gives people their careers back, which means that it's not a death sentence for your career to have vocal nodules. I think that about does it for today. If you found this video helpful at all, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and maybe consider clicking the little bell so you get a notification every time I release a video, if that's something you're interested in. But if you could click that thumbs up button, it really helps me out. That should about do it for today. I'm Stacey Menton from singingmamashomestead.com, and I wish you success on your wellness journey.